Let's move to item 7.1. This is our update on the California STEM Learning Network. We are happy to have with us Chris Rowe, Chief Executive Officer of the California STEM Learning Network. To introduce this item will be Vice Chancellor Russell.
Thank you very much, President Himmelstein and Board of Governors members. As we start looking at the academic programs and the direction that we're going in the state, the area of STEM education has come up on several occasions. I attended a meeting about a year ago where the major corporations and foundations that were focusing on STEM education came together. It was very apparent that the community colleges had a place in that discussion. As we move forward with the CSL-NET, the learning network that's focusing on STEM education, just recently a new CEO was appointed. And so I've asked Chris Rowe to come here today to give you kind of an update on what their thinking is, where they're going with this network. And so I will turn the rest of the time over to Chris.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Chancellor Scott, President Himmelstein, Vice President Perez, board members. It's really an honor to be here today. As Dr. Russell just mentioned, I just recently moved back to California after spending 7 years in Washington, D.C. With the Business Higher Education Forum, which was a group of CEOs and university presidents that were working on education and workforce policy. One of the main areas that I was focusing on for about 5 years was STEM education and STEM workforce. So when I was offered this opportunity to come back to California, I spent about 10 years here previously. I was really excited because I realize, and I think you do as well, that California, when I think about STEM, the STEM workforce, the STEM economy, is the preeminent and should be the preeminent leader in the nation. But we have many, many challenges here. I don't have to tell you that. I've been listening to your discussions this morning about budget. There are huge challenges before us, but I see a tremendous opportunity for the California STEM Learning Network to work together collaboratively with the community college system to really advance and really put California back in a leadership position nationally when it comes to STEM education and STEM workforce. So what I wanted to do today was just give you a very brief update about what we're doing and to hopefully open a dialogue about future ways that we can work together. So I'll be pretty brief. I know that you've got a lot on your agenda. I did bring a handout with me that has some interesting data. I won't go through all of that, but I will point to one very interesting study, and I don't know if you've seen this. It's on the second page, and I apologize, the slides are kind of small. Study that came out recently by Tony Carnevale at Georgetown about the STEM workforce and educational attainment. And I'll walk you through the graph because it's a little hard to read. But basically what he is saying is that the educational attainment when it comes to STEM and the STEM workforce has been changing dramatically over the last 20 years. And he's projecting forward over the next 10 years to 2018 what's going to happen. And if you read this chart closely, you'll see that the proportion of the STEM workforce that is needed to obtain bachelor's degrees and master's degrees is actually kind of leveling off, but that the community college or the some college area is actually increasing. And I think that's because, as you probably know, we live in a very technologically advanced society where a lot of associate's degrees and certificates are needed. More and more of these degrees and certificates are needed to retrain, to keep our workforce humming along. And I'm struck by looking at the data here in California, for example, looking at the unemployment rate, which is hovering around 9%, but being in San Francisco and close to Silicon Valley, where I am right now, I see companies struggling to hire people in the technology sector. They're desperate to find people with backgrounds in science and engineering and technology. So there's a huge mismatch here. And that's one of the things as a network that we're hoping to address. So I think there's a couple other slides on here that are very telling on page 2 and looking at the breakdown of STEM degrees in the state. There's about 5,000 associate's degrees right now, or at least 2009, that were awarded in STEM. But we see a huge disparity between men and women, for example. Almost twice as many men getting associate's degrees in STEM as women. And the last slide at the bottom of the page, and again, I apologize, it's kind of small, looks at the ethnic breakdown along each of those areas: associate's degrees, bachelor's degrees, master's degrees, and doctorate degrees. And you can see as you move to the right, the proportion of students in the underrepresented groups, Latino students, African American students, Native American students, gets progressively smaller and smaller as we move along that chain from associate's degrees to bachelor's degrees and on. So that's one of the primary objectives of the California STEM Learning Network, is to really close that achievement gap, to close that interest gap and competency gap when it comes to STEM disciplines. So that is one of the key goals of our network, is to really focus on increasing interest and competency in all STEM disciplines for all students in the state, grades K through 14. We want more students who are college and career ready, so that when they come to community college, they don't have to be remediated, so that they're ready to actually engage in college level coursework. And we're hoping that more students will actually pursue degrees in STEM areas, although that is not our exclusive focus. We want to make sure that all students and all citizens of California have the requisite understanding of science, technology, engineering, math, because they have to be citizens in this state. They have to be able to look at the referendums that come out. They have to be able to understand the technology and the science that surrounds them in their daily lives. So while we want more certificates and degrees in STEM fields, we realize that all students need to have this basic understanding in the STEM disciplines in order to be productive citizens in our state. And with your 2.7 million students, I think the community college system is a natural partner in working with us in this area. So I'll quickly just talk a little bit about what we're doing. We're actually 1 year old as of a couple weeks ago. The organization really started its genesis about 3 years ago with a small planning grant from the Gates Foundation that led to a series of discussions, and I know the community college system has been involved in many of those discussions. And we've launched in the past year. We're taking a two-pronged approach. What we're really trying to do is to create a network. We're not about creating new programs. There are many, many programs out there already. What we're trying to do is connect these unnatural stakeholders who are all concerned and part of the STEM economy and the STEM workforce in the state. That includes K-12 schools. It includes community colleges, the CSUs, the UCs, and it includes strong business leadership in everything that we do. Because the business community ultimately are the folks that are going to be hiring and employing these folks and are driving the economy in the state. But we also include in this partnership funders, as well as informal nonprofit organizations and informal science and STEM organizations like museums, like the Exploratorium, like the Discovery Science Center. What we're trying to do is work on a regional basis to create almost mini CSL nets in each region, because we understand, I think as you do, that this state is also driven by regional economies. So we've begun to work with an initial 6 groups who've stepped up and said, we want to join, we're supportive of your overall goals and mission, and we're going to begin working with you and with each other to build this network that will share resources, develop common understanding, and develop new knowledge. So right now, we've got about 40% of students in the state that are covered by these initial 6. There's 3 in northern part of the state, 3 in the southern part of the state. We've got about another 4 groups that are already waiting to get on board, to join. There's tremendous energy and excitement around the state to actually build this statewide network. So over the next year, I think we're going to expand very strongly with these regional approaches. But as a network, we also need things and ideas for the network to engage in. So we have a number of statewide initiatives that were formed during a couple-year process, actually, of vetting, town hall discussions, and so forth. And we came up with 4 different initial initiatives that the group felt it was important to focus on. And these span both the in-school environment, and again, this is K-14 but they also span the out-of-school environment. So we're very concerned, for example, in K-12 education, that many students do not get adequate amounts of science. They get very little, if no, engineering or technology in their daytime during school. So we've developed a very robust partnership with the California After School Network and beginning to work with the California Department of Education to leverage state-funded after-school dollars and after-school programs with a goal to reach 1 million students over the next decade to provide high-quality STEM activities in out-of-school time. There's already a very robust network that's out there providing these activities, but to date, there's not been a strong focus on STEM as part of this series of activities. So we're working very closely with them to define what constitutes high-quality STEM activities, working with their network to help train their providers. And again, I think this is a great area of potential collaboration with the community colleges, because a lot of those students that are working in out-of-school time activities are community college students, which leads to our second statewide initiative, which focuses on teachers and pathways into teaching careers in STEM fields. Again, I think this is a strong area where we would love to collaborate with the system and with community colleges individually around workforce production when it comes to teachers. We know that community colleges are pathways for many students to begin teaching careers, but we think there's a lot of work that can be done to help encourage and build stronger pathways into teaching, especially in the STEM fields. We have a third initiative that is focused on in-school time activities. We know that there's over 500 partnership academies in California that have a very strong career technical education focus, working with them around the STEM sectors as well, and groups like Linked Learning that are trying to figure out ways to combine very rigorous approaches that provide students a college-ready education while providing them career technical education as well. We are also very concerned about leveraging virtual education. We know that in a constrained economy, when we're turning away students from community colleges and from CSU campuses, we have to get much better about leveraging the tremendous amount of technology tools that we have out there, the blended learning models. And STEM is a perfect way to basically the content being delivered through virtual education. And we know that there's tremendous amounts of resources in the state with our Silicon Valley, with our technology sector, to really leverage that industry as we really ramp up the ability to deliver high-quality STEM education through virtual means as well, and particularly with many of our rural areas. There was a recent I-3 grant that came out from the government that does have as its focus rural schools and STEM education. And a number of our partners are going to be applying for that grant, for example. And that's another way that the network will work, is that we're actually providing opportunities for our partners to apply for and actually scale interesting ideas through grants to the federal government, for the Department of Labor, Department of Education, et cetera. So the last thing I wanted to just tell you about, in addition to what we're doing here in California, we are part of a growing national movement. As I said, I spent my last 7 years in Washington, D.C., and it's been interesting to see from a national perspective this proliferation of activity at state levels. So in addition to the California STEM Learning Network, there are approximately 20 states now around the country that have some form of statewide STEM networks. And these group of states are now beginning to work together much more effectively to coordinate efforts to advance a policy and advocacy agenda, and having discussions with the Department of Education in Washington, D.C., the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. As you know, the President has a very strong focus on STEM education and innovation, and working much more collaboratively with those groups in Washington, D.C., as well as being able to, again, scale up interesting ideas across multiple states. So our whole effort is really designed to help scale rapidly innovation and best practices. So with that, I know I threw a lot of information at you very quickly. I wanted to open it up for conversation and questions. Thanks again for the opportunity to come today and talk with you.
Chris. Board members, any comments or questions? Member Baum?
Thank you. Thank you for letting us know about this. There's a lot of good lessons here, and in a few minutes, we're going to hear from the State Board of Education, the Director of the Board of Education. How are you navigating that? Because we hear from the education, there's groups mobilized for arts education,
Yes.
groups mobilized for civics education, groups mobilized for physical education.
Right.
How do you integrate all of that into and make it happen
Right.
in this landscape?
Well, we are working right now on a policy and advocacy agenda and framework, and we're actually building this through a very collaborative and deliberative process with our regional alliances, but also bringing in the multitude of stakeholders to this discussion, including the Teachers Association, the different other policy and advocacy groups around the state. So we've begun a number of conversations with groups cross-sector, again, the business community being part of that leadership, to develop a policy and advocacy agenda that is also being discussed among the different states as well. So we do have a good relationship with the state board. Actually, Mike Hurst was one of my former mentors at Stanford University, so I've had a long working relationship with Mike, which is really exciting. But I think both the State Board of Education and the Department of Education are very interested in advancing a STEM agenda here in the state, and we look forward to working very collaboratively with them to talk about these key issues. We have so many issues coming down the pike. Common Core standards, implementation, science standards are set to come out next week in Washington, D.C., which is really exciting. They will have technology and engineering standards embedded as part of that. We've got NAEP 2014 coming down the road. So the policy and advocacy arena, there's so much happening right now that we need to really get out in front of and help to shape that conversation and dialogue.
What tools do you have at your disposal? I mean, how big of a staff, how big of a budget do you have to actually achieve some of these goals?
Well, we're 1 year old, so we're fairly small at this point. I have a very small and efficient staff. We're 4, but we're scaling up over the next year. That's one of my jobs, is to build the capacity of our staff. Our budget is slightly under $2 million for next year, but we will be looking to grow over the next couple of years as the organization evolves.
You're funding largely from philanthropic foundations? I know Bill
Yes.
Gates has been focused on this quite
Yes.
a bit.
So we had some initial funding from the Gates Foundation that will continue through their intermediary Battelle, which is located in Columbus, Ohio. The Bechtel Foundation based in San Francisco is one of our largest supporters, and they've been very generous and very committed to STEM education over a long period of time. We're also talking with a number of other foundations about support over the next year as well. And then grants, and we won't be doing any contract work per se, but we will be applying for a number of other grants, both here in the state and federally as well.
Well, it's very interesting, exciting to hear about it, and I'm looking forward to getting more momentum going in this area. So
Yes.
I appreciate the
Building our network has been really exciting because our network has very deep reach at the local level, and a lot of those members have very strong advocacy components already built into their networks. But it provides us an opportunity to aggregate up, if you will, to the state level, what's already going on in regions like San Diego and San Bernardino and Orange County and Silicon Valley. So we're able to help scale and discuss some of the really important ideas when it comes to STEM education now as a statewide network,
Sure.
which we haven't really had the ability to do before.
No, it's for me, just in working with Member Davis Lyman on CPEC, I see some best practices that you're employing that we may want to, it's a model for what CPEC, the next generation of CPEC could become, and working in intersegmental
Yes.
ways and getting stakeholders and then raising the resources to actually do the work of CPEC too. Thank you.
Yeah.
Member Ramos.
Chris, thanks for coming and sharing this exciting agenda, and I wish you well in seeing it through. It's a very timely and important agenda, and obviously we need to be part of it. I'm particularly intrigued by the regional strategy that you're trying to deploy in developing the network on the ground. And to that point, ironically and fortuitously, I had a discussion with the chief person in our district. I live in the San Luis Obispo area, for Congresswoman Lois Capps, who handles education and health and technology issues. And we had a conversation that dovetails very nicely, actually, on what we've heard from you in terms of the need for a much more regionalized strategy that would bring together elements of the education community at all levels. You know, we have Cal Poly in our region, which is a significant technology magnet. We have a high-tech industry emerging, particularly around new energy economy and other applications in new technologies, biotech and the like. And there's a tremendous disaggregation of connections between that business community, the higher education field, general community groups. It sounds like your model may be one that would be useful for us to be talking about in relationship to how we might be able to actually mobilize some kind of an effort on the STEM front involving all of these players. And certainly, from Santa Barbara City College to Cuesta College, to Hancock College, in between, we have a good infrastructure of community colleges that I think could be drivers for this in the region. So how would we link with you to explore the possibility of a Central Coast contingent?
You're very fortuitous. We're doing that as we speak. I actually met with them 2 weeks ago and met
Terrific.
with Assemblywoman Capps representative. We convened about 100 folks. With the San Luis Obispo County Office
Well, then
of
you're who she was
Education.
talking about.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay, well, I'll pass lead to you then.
And met with the president of Hancock and Cuesta College to be an integral part of that network. And they will be, I believe, the next regional alliance that gets off the ground. They have a tremendous amount of momentum already, and we're helping provide resources to them as they plan. It really struck me during that meeting, there were 100 folks assembled, and the folks were getting up and just ticking off, what each group is doing in their region. There were so many resources and so many assets in that room, but there was also a tremendous amount of duplication of effort. So we had 4 different aerospace camps that were all, none of them were coordinated, and they were all very small. So that got the group discussing, well, maybe there's a way that we can collaborate together more effectively to scale some of the things that seem to be kind of happening in isolation at this point. So that's happening at a regional level, but it's also happening at a state level as well.
Terrific.
So yeah, we should definitely talk.
Well, I want to follow up with you on that. Thanks for your good work in that area. Appreciate it.
Member McDougall and Member Davis-Lyman.
I'd like to add my thanks to those of the other board members for your presence today. I think the work that you're doing is extremely important and directly related to the mission of community colleges. I'd like to share what I think is the biggest challenge that you confronted, and I think you just referred to it in your comments. The biggest challenge that I see is moving from model programs to broad-based involvement. And nothing exemplifies that more from my perspective than one of the items in our agenda for your presentation that highlighted that 78% of high school graduates do not meet the readiness benchmark levels for one or more entry-level college courses in mathematics, science, reading, and English. Yet many communities are unaware of this deficit. They're unaware of it because they see a model program of an engineering academy or 1 or 2 other such programs. But taking this to scale to meet the objectives that you have outlined in your paper is really the tremendous challenge. Building a model program is a wonderful thing to do, but it doesn't approach the solution to the problem.
That's right.
And I would hope in your work that constant focus on meeting the issue from a broad-based perspective is what people are accepting the challenge to do, as opposed to taking the, if you will, the fruit that's easy to pick off the tree. Because we know we can do that. But the real challenge is to do the broad-based approach.
I agree completely, yes.
Member Davis-Lyman.
Thank you again for coming, and I'm actually very pleased to follow upon Member McDougall's comments, because I wanted to share with you a program that CPEC is running, and Member Baum attended the last meeting, and we both heard of this exciting project. It's in its 3rd year, and it's teacher preparation and teacher in-service training. And it's a kind of a regional approach, but specifically for rural schools in San Joaquin County. The project is involved and run with Marcia Trott by her at CPEC, but the University of Pacific School of Education Dean is involved, the San Joaquin County Department of Education's involved, but really the fruit of this is the testimony from the teachers. They're starting very young, grabbing first, second, and third graders with scientific inquiry and that kind of thing, and doing intensive professional development with the teachers. What has happened is they now are holding in these rural schools family science nights. And they're getting 400 to 700 people coming. So not only is that student getting it, the parents are involved, the siblings are involved. It was one of the most exciting projects that I've heard, really infusing this way of thinking and being and the possibilities of being in the future. Parents are grabbing onto it too to help guide their children in these areas. So I would say that is a project that really is worth looking into. Very, very interesting. It isn't just a model program. It's these rural schools in San Joaquin County that have not been connected to each other. It's fascinating.
Can I get more information from you on that?
Yeah,
Okay.
well, I'll give you the contact.
Any other comments from board members? We thank you, Chris, for your presentation. Look forward to having some updates from you and how we can best partner with you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chancellor.